They called Lucio Barone the most patient man in Philadelphia, and they meant it as a warning. Patient the way a coyote is patient, still and silent until the moment it isn't. At 40, he ran the Barone family's interests from a modest office above his grandmother's restaurant on Passyunk Avenue, and from that same office he controlled the port logistics, the union contracts, and the quiet understanding that kept 3 rival crews from tearing South Philly apart at the seams. He had been offered partnerships, mergers, and marriage alliances. With daughters of men who could double his wealth overnight, he had declined every single one. Serafina Carlucci, the most beautiful woman in the South Jersey underworld, had sat across from him at dinner 2 months ago and told him plainly that she could give him an heir and a peace treaty in the same breath. He had thanked her for the wine and called his driver. His underboss, a compact, sharp-eyed man named Gio Pelosi, had long given up trying to understand it. "You could have any woman in this city," Gio had muttered once. "You know what's wrong with you?" "Yes," Lucio had said without looking up from his ledger. "I know exactly what's wrong with me." What was wrong with him? What had been wrong with him for 19 years, since his father was shot on the steps of a federal courthouse, was that Lucio Barone had long since decided that nothing in his life would be allowed to matter too much. People who mattered were leverage, and leverage, in his world, was a death sentence. The pocket watch had been his one exception. It was gold, not particularly flashy, the kind of piece that looked unremarkable until you held it. Then you felt the weight of it, real, dense, old-world weight. His grandfather Aldo had carried it in the Italian army. His father had worn it on a chain in his vest pocket every single day of his life. After the funeral, Lucio had pried it from the evidence bag the district attorney's office had reluctantly returned, and he had carried it in the interior breast pocket of every suit jacket since. It was scratched on the back, engraved with a small crest that no one outside the family would recognize, and it had never once left his possession, until the night of the Hartwell Hotel meeting. Lucio had been in Suite 1108 for 40 minutes when the situation deteriorated. A representative from the Murano crew out of Atlantic City had arrived drunk and belligerent, convinced that a renegotiated port deal was a personal insult. What followed was not a fight. Lucio did not fight in hotel suites, but it was a tense, physical removal that involved 2 of his men steering a shouting, swinging drunk through the connecting hallway toward the service elevator. Somewhere in that hallway, in the brief struggle where the man's elbow caught Lucio's hard in the chest, the watch slipped from the inside pocket of his jacket. By the time Lucio reached the lobby and settled into his car, the watch was somewhere on the 14th floor of the Hartwell Hotel, which was, at 11:47 on a Wednesday night, being cleaned by the overnight housekeeping crew. Stella Gorman had worked the overnight shift at the Hartwell for 2 years, and she had a system. She started at the top floor and worked down, suite by suite, cart trailing behind her. At 26, she was broad-shouldered, soft-bellied, with thick arms she'd stopped apologizing for some time around her 23rd birthday. She wore her dark hair pulled back under the uniform cap, and she moved through the hotel's marble hallways with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that the fastest way to be invisible was to be useful. She needed this job. Her brother Danny was 18 months into a 2-year automotive program at community college, and their mother's dialysis ran 3 times a week. Stella's paycheck was the exact width of their life. She found the watch on the carpet of the connecting hallway, between suites 1108 and 1110, half tucked under the baseboard, probably kicked there during whatever had clearly happened in this corridor. The scuff marks on the wall told a story she didn't need details on. Stella picked it up and held it under the ceiling light. It was beautiful, heavy in a way that meant something. She turned it over and saw the scratches on the back, the worn engraving, the places where the gold had been touched 10,000 times. She snapped it open. The face was ivory with Roman numerals, and someone had taped a tiny, creased photograph inside the lid. Two men standing outside a stone church somewhere in Italy. One of them was old. The other was young and serious-faced, and something about the jaw and the set of his shoulders made Stella think she might have seen that face before, on a news segment about organized crime in the Delaware Valley that she hadn't paid much attention to at the time. She held the watch for a long time. A piece like this was worth several $1,000s at minimum, maybe more to the right buyer. She thought about Danny's tuition balance. She thought about the 3-month gap in her mother's insurance that the billing office had flagged last week. Then she looked at that photograph again. The young man's hand rested on the old man's shoulder. The old man was laughing. Someone's grandfather, she thought. Someone's whole history, sitting in this little gold case. She slipped the watch into her apron pocket. She was not going to sell it. She was going to find out who it belonged to. It took her 4 days. The Hartwell's front desk manager was not helpful. Lost and Found went through corporate, which had a 2-week processing window, which meant the watch would sit in a bin in a back office for 14 days before anyone actively looking for it was ever contacted. Stella wasn't willing to hand it off like that. She did her own research on her lunch breaks, cross-referencing the room reservation for Suite 1108. She shouldn't have been able to see it, but Priya from the front desk owed her a favor. She ran the company name through Google until she found a holding company that led her to a restaurant on Passyunk Avenue called Barone's, which led her to a name which led her to a 15-second segment from a Channel 6 news story that had aired 3 years ago. The man in the photograph inside the watch, older now, but the jaw was the same. She looked at the address. She looked at the watch sitting on her kitchen table. She looked at her phone, where a notification from the dialysis center was telling her that her mother's next appointment had a copay balance of $412. "You're doing this," she told herself. "Go give the man his watch and come home." Barone's restaurant opened at 11 for lunch service. Stella arrived at 11:15 on her day off, wearing her good coat, a burgundy wool blend, the only genuinely nice thing she owned, and clutching a canvas tote bag with the watch wrapped in a clean dish towel at the bottom. The hostess looked at her the way hostesses in places like this always looked at Stella. A quick professional once-over that communicated, without a single word, that this was not the kind of establishment Stella usually frequented. "I need to see Lucio Barone," Stella said. "I have something that belongs to him." "Mr. Barone doesn't take walk-ins," the hostess said pleasantly. "If you'd like to leave your name." "I'd rather deliver it in person. It's valuable and it's personal." "Then you're welcome to leave it with me." "I'm not leaving it with anyone I don't know," Stella said, just as pleasantly. "I'll wait." She sat down on the bench by the door. The hostess excused herself into the back, and 10 minutes later, Gio came out and introduced himself as Mr. Barone's associate. "Whatever you have, you can leave it with me," Gio said, studying her with practiced detachment. "You'll be compensated fairly." "I don't want compensation," Stella said. "I want to make sure it gets to the right person. I found a pocket watch at the Hartwell Hotel Wednesday night. It's old. I think it matters to someone." Something shifted in Gio's face so fast Stella almost missed it. "Wait here," he said. Lucio Barone had been told in the past 4 days that the watch was gone. His men had gone back to the hotel. They had spoken to security, to management, to the housekeeping supervisors on every shift. They had been told nothing had been turned in. Lucio had accepted this with the same cold stillness he accepted everything, and had spent 4 nights staring at the ceiling of his bedroom in Chestnut Hill, thinking about the last time he had looked at that photograph inside the lid. He came downstairs expecting a shakedown or a misunderstanding. He did not expect the woman sitting on the bench by the front door. She was maybe 5'4", built broad and soft, with thick dark hair and cheeks flushed from the November cold. She was wearing a coat that had seen better days and holding a canvas bag in her lap, with the careful attention of someone protecting something fragile. She looked up when he approached, and she looked directly at him. Not at the two men flanking him, not at the room, directly at him. "Lucio Barone," she said. "Who's asking?" "Stella Gorman, housekeeping at the Hartwell. I found something in the 14th floor hallway last Wednesday, and I believe it belongs to you." She reached into the bag without hesitation, unwrapped the dish towel, and held out the watch. Lucio stopped walking. He had been running one of the most dangerous criminal enterprises on the eastern seaboard for 12 years. He had negotiated with men who smiled while they planned his funeral. He had sat across from federal agents, simultaneously building a case against him. He had once talked a rival down from putting a gun to his brother's head without his voice shaking once. In all of that, he had never been rendered completely still by a stranger holding something in their open hands. He crossed the room and took the watch from her palm. It was warm from being in the bag. He turned it over, ran his thumb across the scratches, snapped it open. The photograph was exactly as he had left it. His grandfather, laughing outside San Benedetto. His father, 23 years old, serious and proud. "Where did you find it?" he asked, and his voice came out quieter than he intended. "Carpet near the baseboard, the connecting hallway between 11:08 and 11:10. It had been kicked pretty far under the molding. You work overnight. Night shift housekeeping, yes. You had this for 4 days. I needed time to figure out who it belonged to. The front desk runs everything through corporate lost and found, and that's a 2-week hold. I wasn't willing to do that." He studied her. She did not look away. Most people, when Lucio Barone turned his full attention on them, found something else to look at. Stella Gorman looked like she was waiting to be dismissed, with every intention of leaving the moment she was. "You know what this is worth," Lucio said carefully. Stella's chin lifted slightly. "It's worth a lot more to whoever that is." She nodded at the watch. "The man in the photograph. That's my grandfather." I figured. She stood and tugged her coat straight. "I have to catch the 47. I hope it's everything you remembered." She walked toward the door. No lingering, no waiting for gratitude, no calculation whatsoever. She had done what she came to do, and she was leaving. "Miss Gorman." She paused with one hand on the door. "Why didn't you sell it?" Stella turned halfway. The expression on her face was the most unsentimental thing he had ever seen. "Because it had a picture in it," she said, "and I'd want someone to bring it back to me." She pushed the door open and stepped out into the November cold. Outside, 2 things happened in about 4 seconds. A black Escalade that had been idling at the corner pulled forward. The rear window rolled down, and Gio, who had stepped out the side door to check the street as a matter of routine, came sprinting back through the kitchen entrance, shouting one word: "Murano." Lucio was already moving. He hit the front door at a full run and came out onto the sidewalk, where Stella was walking with her head down against the wind, 3 steps from the curb, perfectly framed in the open window's sightline. He closed the distance in 2 strides, pulled her hard left with one arm, and put himself between her and the street just as the first shot cracked the air and took a chunk out of the brick above the restaurant's entrance sign. The Escalade sped through the intersection. Gio and 2 other men came out firing, and then there was just the echo bouncing off the row houses and a car alarm going off somewhere down the block. Lucio straightened up. Stella was pressed against the brick, her bag still clutched to her chest, her eyes wide, breathing fast but not making a sound. Are you hurt?" His hands moved quickly over her shoulders, her arms. I'm not." Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. What was that? People with a grievance. He stepped back but didn't go far. They saw you hand me the watch. They watched my men stand down for you. In their world, that makes you someone I trust. He paused. Someone to use against me. Stella stared at him. I'm a hotel housekeeper. I ride the bus home. Not tonight, Lucio said. She did not go home that night, or the night after, or the one after that. Lucio moved her to the house in Chestnut Hill, and Gio arranged for Stella's mother to be seen by a specialist Lucio kept on retainer. Danny was deposited at a friend's apartment, with a terse explanation that his sister was safe and it would be a few days. Stella accepted none of this gracefully. She paced the guest room. She argued with Gio for 20 solid minutes about her work schedule. When a personal shopper arrived with boxes of designer clothing, sample sizes, precisely the kind of thing that arrived when someone assumed the word woman meant a size 4, she sent the woman out with every box unopened. Lucio found her that evening in the kitchen, eating cereal at his marble island because she had found the Cheerios in the pantry and decided that whatever his housekeeper was leaving for her was too complicated. You sent back $4,000 in clothing, he said, leaning against the doorframe. None of it fit. She didn't look up. I wear a 16 in tops and an 18 in pants, and whoever you called brought samples. I don't wear samples. She tapped her spoon against the bowl. If you're going to keep me here, have someone bring things that fit. Otherwise, I'll keep wearing what I arrived in. I can arrange that. Don't do me any favors. She looked at him then. Under the kitchen light, the dark circles under her eyes were obvious, and so was the fact that she was not afraid of him. She was annoyed and tired, and specifically annoyed about being tired. I have to explain to the Hartwell why I didn't come in. I can't have my manager thinking I walked off a shift. It's been handled. You're on a medical leave of absence that won't affect your employment record. She set the spoon down. You can't just handle things. These are my things, my job, my mother's co-pays, my brother's. Your mother saw Dr. Ellman this afternoon, Lucio said quietly. Her billing balance has been cleared. Your brother is fine. Those things were handled because they needed to be, and because I put you in this situation. He paused. Not as a favor, as an obligation. Stella looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression adjusted, not softening exactly, but recalibrating. You're very strange, she finally said. I've been told. She pushed the cereal bowl aside. Sit down then. You're making me nervous standing in the doorway like that. He pulled out the stool across from her and sat down. It was the most straightforwardly human thing anyone had said to him in years. The 2 weeks that followed were not what either of them had expected. Lucio had spent his entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Associates who needed decisions, lawyers who needed direction, men who owed him money and women who wanted it. The entire ecosystem of his existence ran on transaction, and he had become so fluent in it that he had completely stopped noticing what was missing. What was missing, he discovered slowly and with considerable discomfort, was someone who simply talked to him. Stella told him about the hotel, about the guests who trashed rooms in ways that defied imagination, and the ones who left $20 bills folded under the pillow with handwritten thank you notes. She told him about Danny's plan to open his own shop one day, about her mother's good days and bad days, about the specific, grinding indignity of working a physical job in a body that strangers felt entitled to comment on. Does that happen often? Lucio asked one evening. They were at the kitchen island again. She had gradually taken over the cooking, and it was better than anything his housekeeper produced. Constantly, she said, without self-pity, the way you'd describe rush-hour traffic, present and annoying, and not worth the energy of outrage. Managers who assume I can't keep up because of how I look. Guests who make comments. A supervisor at the last job I had before the Hartwell told me during my review that I should consider whether I was representing the brand well. She pushed a piece of bread across the cutting board. You learn to work around it. You shouldn't have to work around it. She looked at him steadily. No, she agreed, I shouldn't. He told her things too, by degrees. About his father. About the 19 years of holding together something his grandfather had built on the belief that loyalty was the only currency that didn't devalue. About the particular, unacknowledged loneliness of being the person everyone needed to be in charge, all the time, without exception. You chose this, she said one night, not as an accusation, just as a fact she was turning over. I did, he said. I chose it because the alternative was letting it fall to someone who wouldn't protect the people depending on it. That's still a choice I made. She was quiet for a moment. That's either genuinely honorable or a very sophisticated way of not examining it too closely. He laughed, a real one, brief and caught off guard. Stella looked up like the sound surprised her. Probably both, he said. She almost smiled, probably. The attack came on a Thursday at 3 in the morning. Stella came awake to darkness and breaking glass below, and before she could reach the lamp, the guest room door opened and Lucio was there with his hand out. Now, he said, come with me. They moved through the back hallway toward the study, where Gio was already positioned with 2 men. Outside, the grounds were loud with a coordinated hit, too organized for the Murano crew's usual style, too many people for a warning. It's Richie Santone, Gio said, checking his weapon. He's been talking to the Muranos for 3 months. He gave them the layout, the shift rotations, the gate codes, all of it. Lucio's face didn't change, but something behind it went very still. Santone had been with the family for 11 years, had eaten at this table, had stood beside Lucio at his father's burial in the January sleet. Get Stella to the service stairs, Stella said. 3 men looked at her. Behind the kitchen, she said. They run straight down to the garage, and there's a steel door at the bottom. If they came in through the north grounds, they'll be watching the front of the house and the east wing exit. The garage door opens south. She looked at Lucio. They won't be covering the south exit, not if they think you'll run for the front. The room held a single beat of silence. She's right, Gio said. Lucio moved. He put his hand on Stella's back and steered her toward the kitchen stairs, his other hand on the Glock from the study safe. Behind them, Gio and the others met whatever was coming through the front entry. The sounds were terrible. Gunfire, shouting, the crash of something heavy, and Stella kept moving, kept her head down, kept her feet exactly where Lucio put his. They reached the garage. The steel door held. Lucio punched in the code, pressed Stella through first, and they came out into the cold south-facing alley just as headlights swept through from the north end of the property. They were clear. 30 feet behind them, a shot rang out from a second-story window, one of Santone's men who had gotten inside before Gio locked the perimeter. The bullet caught Lucio low on his left side, and he went down to one knee with a short, hard sound. Lucio Stella dropped beside him instantly. Keep moving. You're hit. She got his arm over her shoulders. She was strong, stronger than anyone who had never paid attention to her would have guessed, because most people had never thought to pay attention. She got him upright and moving, and they covered the next 40 feet to the tree line before Gio's men swept and neutralized the position, and the shooting stopped. She did not let go until they reached the vehicle. The doctor came to the safe house they relocated to, and Gio waited outside the door while Stella sat inside, pressing clean cloth against Lucio's side and firmly telling him to stop issuing instructions to people through the wall. They can hear you fine, she said. Stop moving. I need to know if Santone. Gio will tell you when there's something to tell. You were shot. She pressed harder, and he went still. The bullet went through muscle. Stop calling it a graze. He looked at her. She was focused entirely on what she was doing, jaw set, hands completely steady. There was blood on the sleeve of her borrowed sweatshirt, and she hadn't said a single word about it. You got me out, he said. The south stairs were the obvious move. I didn't see it. You were thinking about the threat. I was thinking about the building. She glanced up at him briefly. I've cleaned every inch of that house. I know where everything goes. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later, confirmed the wound was serious but manageable, and set to work. Gio confirmed, shortly after that, the south exit had been the difference. The north and east positions had been fully covered and waiting. He confirmed with audible satisfaction that Richie Santone had been located, that a conversation had taken place, and that the Murano crew's ambitions regarding Philadelphia had been comprehensively revised. It was over. It was close to 5 in the morning when the doctor finished. Lucio was propped against the headboard, properly bandaged, the medication making the edges of everything softer without blurring the center of it. Stella was in the chair beside the bed, knees drawn up, still wearing the blood-stained sweatshirt, asleep. He looked at her for a long time. 19 years of keeping everything at a careful and deliberate distance. Every calculated refusal, every closed door, every woman who had come to him with an agenda tucked just behind her smile, wanting the name or the money or the influence, wanting the crown and not the man who was exhausted from carrying it. He reached to the nightstand where his things had been placed and found the pocket watch. Stella. She came awake the way she seemed to do most things, quickly and without complaint. What? Are you? I'm fine. He held the watch out on his open palm. I want to tell you something. She looked at the watch and then at him and waited. My grandfather carried this for 40 years, Lucio said. My father carried it until the day he died. After the funeral, I went to the DA's evidence office, and I sat there until they gave it back to me. He turned it slowly in his fingers. Every woman who's come near my life in the past 20 years has wanted what this represents. The name, the weight behind it. They wanted the crown. He looked at her directly. You handed it back to me and walked out to catch a bus. Stella made a small sound, the very beginning of a laugh. I was going to walk to the stop. You should have let me call you a car. He held the watch out toward her. I want you to hold on to this. She went still, Lucio. Not indefinitely, he said, and his voice was steadier than he had any right to expect. Just until you decide you're ready to give it back, on different terms. He paused. I'm asking you to marry me, Stella. I understand this is an extraordinary situation and an unusual request, and I understand you have a substantial number of reasonable objections to it. At least 40, she said quietly. And I intend to answer every single one of them. But I want you to know that I'm not asking because you helped get me out of that house tonight, though you did. I'm asking because you sat at my kitchen island and ate cereal and told me to sit down. He held the watch steady between them. I'm asking because you're real. And I've been surrounded by people performing versions of themselves for so long that I had forgotten what real felt like. Stella looked at the watch for a long moment. The room was quiet in the way that only happens just before the city wakes up, that thin, suspended hour where everything is still. She reached out and took the watch from his palm. 40 objections, she said. Name them. Danny finishes his program. No interruptions, no relocations, nothing that pulls him off course. Already planned. My mother's care is handled by someone she actually trusts, not just someone expensive. She has opinions about doctors. Dr. Ellman has excellent patient reviews. I'll introduce them properly. I keep working. She turned the watch over in her hands, the way he always did, feeling the weight of it. I don't know exactly at what, yet. But I am not a kept woman. That is not who I am, and I won't become her. You could run the Hartwell, he said simply. The property management side, if you wanted it. Stella looked up at him. You own the Hartwell. I own 4 hotels in the Delaware Valley. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, then back at him. That is genuinely the most irritating thing you have ever said to me. You have 37 objections remaining. She laughed. A full one this time, unguarded, filling the small room in a way that caught him completely off guard, the way she always seemed to catch him off guard, which was remarkable considering he was a man who had built an entire life on never being caught off guard. She snapped the watch open and looked at the photograph one more time. The old man laughing outside a stone church in Italy, the young serious father who would not make it to 40. Yes, she said, with all 40 objections as standing conditions. Agreed, he said, everyone. She closed the watch carefully and held it in both hands, feeling the weight that had been passed down through 3 generations of men who had tried, in their own imperfect ways, to hold something worth holding. For the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, Lucio Barone felt the particular and unfamiliar peace of something settling exactly where it belonged. 18 months later, the annual dinner for the Barone Family Foundation, a legitimate charitable organization funding after-school programs across South Philadelphia and vocational training for adults in workforce transition, was held in the grand ballroom of the Hartwell Hotel, which was midway through its 2nd major renovation since Stella Gorman had taken over the property management division and decided that the lobby carpet was an embarrassment. Lucio sat at the head table and watched his wife move through the room. She was wearing deep green. She had told him early on that it was the only color that made her feel entirely like herself, and the dress had been made by a woman in Fishtown who ran a small atelier and made clothes for bodies that existed outside of Fashion Week imagination. Stella was talking to a city councilwoman about the vocational program's expansions into 3 new neighborhoods. She was laughing at something. She was entirely at ease in a room that had once looked at her like she didn't belong, and that now, 18 months on, looked at her like she had always been the most interesting person in it. Gio leaned over from the adjacent seat. Table 7, the new alderman. He's been angling for an introduction all evening. Give him 5 more minutes, Lucio said, not looking away from Stella. The pocket watch was in his breast pocket, exactly where it had lived for 40 years of his family's history, and where it would remain for as long as there was a Barone left to carry it. On Stella's right wrist, not the left, she had been very precise about which hand got which piece of jewelry, and why, a conversation that had taken 45 minutes, and that he would have again in a heartbeat, was a gold chain bracelet with a small engraved disc, and on the disc was the Barone family crest, the same one on the back of the watch. She had asked for something she could wear on a job site, without catching it on a door handle, and he had arranged exactly that, and she had snapped the clasp herself on the morning it arrived, and gone back to reviewing renovation invoices without making any fuss at all. The most patient man in Philadelphia had spent 20 years making sure nothing got close enough to matter. He had been outmaneuvered in the end by a woman who found his grandfather's watch under a baseboard in a hotel corridor and simply decided it ought to go home.